think often when we are going through a tough time, we know that the people who love us worry about us. So we want somebody to talk to, but then we're scared to talk to a friend or a family member because we know by doing that, they'll also worry about you too and you don't want to burden them. And I think therapy, just having somebody there who's completely impartial and it's a judgment-free zone, just gives you that safe space to just talk about things that you really need to talk about.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sheri Jacobson, and this is TherapyLab, a podcast dedicated to therapy, thought, and the subtle art of mental well-being. In this episode, we are joined by singer-songwriter Chloe Howl, who was shortlisted for the BBC Sound of 2014 and the Critics' Choice Award at the Brits. I'm looking forward to finding out more about Chloe's life, work, and how she looks after her well-being. So welcome, Chloe. Hi there. Let's start off with a quick well-being check. How are you today? Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very low mood.
I actually feel kind of like a 8.5 today. I feel really good.
Anything in particular behind it?
I think, this week's been a really positive week for me, and I've had to be really, really strong and assertive, and I just feel really empowered and positive today, so it's good.
Great. Well, we'll get more to how that emerges and what's behind some of your emboldening moments. Can you start to tell us a little bit about how your work and what occupies you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I'm a singer-songwriter. I've been doing that. I've actually been doing it for like 10 years now, so it's been a really long time. This week I played a show, so I'd spent a lot of time rehearsing and getting everything ready for that. And I spend a lot of time in the studio writing songs. So yeah, that's kind of my general life plan.
How did you get into singing and writing songs?
I got into singing. I always loved singing. So when I was a kid, it was like my favourite thing. And, all my family always say that I just never shut up. I was just always singing around the house. And yeah, it just happened very randomly. It was just someone from my hometown ran a studio and I met him one day and we started writing, and then it just kind of all snowballed from there. Yeah.
What does writing mean to you? Does it hold significance, or is it something that you just can't contain and needs to come out?
It's more, to perform, you kind of have to have a well of songs. So, you're always constantly creating and writing. But to write, you have to have like a lot of inspiration. And so I find that if I ever go through a kind of writer's block and I don't know what to write about, because it's quite a big deal putting pen to paper and then releasing these words out into the universe. You have to believe in what you're saying and what you're singing. So I always find the best thing for me is to just go away and not write for a couple of months and just have loads of life experience, like go partying with my friends, see my family, go on dates, whatever happens in those 2 months. And then at the end of it, you're always like, oh, I've had all this life experience that I'm now ready to be inspired by. So yeah.
Yeah, and all the while, are you writing notes? Do you keep a diary or?
I actually started a diary this year. That's my new thing, is this little journal. But I always keep notes in my phone, which I actually think is a really interesting way to live your life, because I think if I didn't have this job, I wouldn't do it. But it's really what I do is when I have a thought or I say something to a friend when I'm explaining situations that's happened to me, if I say a sentence or a couple of words that I think is interesting or poignant, I write it into this little stream of notes that I have, so that when I go in and write, I can have this whole like folder of inspiration. And it's kind of fun because you're like, wow, I say interesting things sometimes. So that's kind of how I do it, yeah.
And I'm interested in the transition between the behind the scenes writing the song and then the public facing performance, which seem to be almost public and private. How does that feel for you?
I think I said this recently. I was, when you're writing songs, it can be actually kind of an embarrassing experience because you're you could be talking about a situation that you're not even fully out of yet, you know, a situation that you're not even fully over, and you know, heartbreak or whatever it is, and you're kind of picking apart that whole experience with another person in the room, because you write with a producer or another songwriter, and also kind of when you come up with melodies, you're kind of just saying gibberish into a microphone, and so you have to really trust the people that you're in the room with enough to kind of put all of that part of yourself out there. But then when you're on stage, you are just putting this whole other side of yourself out there, and you're performing in front of a crowd, and you're dancing in front of people, which sometimes, you know, I remember when I used to struggle to dance when I was at parties, you know what I mean? Even though no one was watching me, everyone was dancing themselves, and now I do it elevated and in front of hundreds of people. But yeah, there definitely is that. But I think once you've had that private moment, it's a lot easier to accept the song that you've written and then express it on stage, I guess. Yeah.
And what was it like for you growing up? So way back in childhood, how would you describe?
Well, I've got a really big family, so I'm one of 6 girls, so quite a crazy household, but also super fun. I had, like, you know, kind of like a little squad of girls, so I had a lot of people to gossip with and lean on, and my mum and I are really close, so I always had that real emotional support there. But it could be quite mad. Obviously, you know, when you've got a lot of siblings, there's always arguments and stuff, but yeah, it could be quite a madhouse, but generally it's just having like a big support network, which is good.
Any challenges that you can recall, either at school or home life?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously my sister, who's a year younger than me, we were just so close in age, and we went to the same school, and we always had a lot of friction, a lot of like, you're copying me situations, and that was quite. And I started to do music, and my mum would have to travel with me, and she would be left behind, and so there was a bit of tension there, which I guess at the time neither of us were emotionally mature enough to address, but it was obviously because of this whole thing that she was often left at home and mum was flying off to do music with me. And I would be like, I didn't understand. I was just like, why does my sister argue with me so much? Why doesn't she like me? And I just wanted to like be really affectionate with my baby sisters and stuff. But yeah, she always kind of must have had this little pit of anger, you know, towards being left behind. And so that was quite hard in my teen years, but luckily we're both kind of out of the woods of that now, so that's all good. But yeah, it's just not, I think family stuff is so unique to each individual family, but everyone has it.
Yeah. And today, what are your greatest challenges, would you say?
I think I was signed before, so I was signed to a major label, and now I'm independent. For up until very recently, I also didn't have a manager. So everything I was doing completely on my own. And when I was signed before, I had such a big team who took took a lot of the pressure off of my shoulders, because they knew how to handle situations. And so they just did it. Whereas the last 2 years, I've had to completely learn all that for myself, and also realizing how naive I was. Despite having all this experience, I hadn't really learned how to put on a show, or, you know, what all the legal jargon meant, and anything like that. So yeah, that's been quite a challenge for me, is kind of basically having to go back to the bare bones of everything and build it all back up for myself. And it was really exhausting. Last year, you know, when I put out 2 songs in 2017, and the first one I kind of dealt with it. It was a lot of pressure, but I was like, okay, I did it. I came through, and I kind of surprised myself. And then the second one just completely exhausted me, and it's so hard to be creative when you've got so much admin and stuff to deal with that is really logical. You know, when you're thinking logically, you're not really thinking creatively necessarily. So that was really hard, and that really wore me out. But that experience also made me look into myself and go, okay, so there's certain things that you can't control, and, you know, there's certain things that are going to be tricky for you, but, you know, you've got to kind of go through those experiences, to come out the other end, and next time it will be easier. So I think those were my challenges, and I'm sort of learning to have a grasp on them now. So yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the exhaustion and what that felt like? How did it manifest for you?
I find in music, you know, when I was touring a lot, there was like physical exhaustion, but I haven't really been doing that, you know, that much in recent years. But in music, it's the emotional exhaustion, because you're pursuing your passion and your dream, and it's something that is so emotional. Writing a song is such an emotional experience. Performing is such an emotional experience. Putting yourself out there and putting your music out there at the risk of ridicule, something that you love so much could be hated, is so emotional. And you have to have so much inner strength and so much self-belief that sometimes you're just not capable of. We're not always capable of that. Even if you are really proud of what you're doing and what you're putting out there, we all have self-doubt. And with music, or being an artist, or being anyone in the spotlight, I think you often feel like any lapse in self-belief opens the door for the whole world to come rushing in and kind of drag you down. So it is really hard to upkeep that character of like, hey, you know, I'm a pop star and I'm doing amazing, and this fantasy I'm selling you, it's all real, guys. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, it was just the emotional exhaustion, because I'd been working in music for so long as well, and it had been really hard, and I have had some pretty bad experiences with it and knocks. And so for me to do it for myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for myself and it's going to be great. And then sometimes it's just not as great as you build it up in your head to be. And when you're alone in it and you don't have a team around you, it just all fell on me. And so I just got really like, oh, I don't know if I can pull myself through another single release, basically.
Yeah, so lots of self-doubts, and you did it. And I'm wondering about what some of the coping strategies might have been that you used to get your self-belief back up.
Yeah, so I released Do It Alone. That moment that I'm talking about now was around my song Do It Alone, and it was towards the end of the year. And I always find when a year closes that I just emotionally, and I just go like, okay, let's let the year end. Just let yourself breathe, chill. In music, everyone goes on holiday in December anyway, so I was like, you can't actually do anything now, so just let yourself breathe, enjoy your holiday, and then in January, we're gonna have a new mindset. And, you know, I think sometimes New Year's resolutions can be not the best way of dealing with stuff, but I always just see it as like a book closing so that you can open the next one. And so, yeah, I just had this weird epiphany moment of like, it was very easy for me to sit there and be like, why is everything so hard for me? Why is my journey in music so much harder than this artist? Why do I have to knock on so many doors just to be kicked back down again? And I suddenly had this moment where I was like, why are you constantly looking outward for reasons? You know, I was like, you're always looking for answers from things that you can't control, basically. I can't control what the person at the record label does or says, or how my music's perceived. What I can control is how I react to the situation, how I handle the situation. And as soon as I realised that, I just found everything so much easier. And it was like a weight had been lifted. And also, I was like, all I want to do, I can control how good and how much I love the music I'm putting out there. And that's all I can really do. And as soon as I made that my only pressure on myself, all was well. So yeah.
And I'm really interested about that self-realization. Were you assisted by any external advice or support, or was it just something that had generated from inside you? As in, is it kind of a natural ability you think that you may have had?
I didn't. So I started to follow a lot of online, a lot of activists online, actually, like a lot of feminist writers and feminist activists, and a lot of their talk was around self-care, and they articulate it so well that I think they kind of helped me just kind of organize my brain a little bit, and because they put words to feelings that I hadn't quite been able to articulate. And just from kind of almost learning the vocabulary, I could have those conversations with myself. And so, yeah, it just kind of came from a place of seeing all these, again, just seeing other people going through it, hearing how they put it into words, and then sitting there and being like, oh, so maybe this is how I feel and how I should handle it. And I was just able to have that conversation with myself.
And it's brilliant, that attitude shift that came and that you were able to adopt. Were there any specific tools or techniques or any well-being habits that you would say that worked for you?
Yeah, well, again, because I'm from a big family and I have loads of friends, I tend to, people come to you for advice in all relationships, people lean on you. And I always found myself giving people this incredible advice. And I'd be like, where is this coming from? And I could hear myself giving people really concise, really constructive advice. And I suddenly was like, why can't I do that for myself? So now the way that I handle myself in a situation is I treat myself and I talk to myself like I would a friend or a sister. And I kind of treat myself with that same patience, but also firmness that I would with somebody that I love. So I find sitting there and having a conversation with myself, which some people would be like, that's a bit weird talking to yourself, but I'm like, it's not. You're so kind to the people you love, but then you also tell them what's what. And so now that's just how I kind of handle myself, and that's really helped.
And that's integrated on a day-to-day basis, or does it come and go, kind of the self-positive talk?
Just whenever I need it, I think I just whenever. I find it easy, emotional impulses they happen all the time. Like you find yourself feeling weirdly jealous of somebody, and I sit there and I go, why? What is it about this situation that's made you feel like that towards that person? And so I just have a sort of conversation with myself, and then you kind of come to a conclusion at the end, I find. Yeah.
Very therapeutic. And of course, which leads me on to the next question, which is, what are your views on therapy?
I think it's great. I have so many. I haven't. I have actually. I had one therapy session when I was 16, and it was, honestly, I just came out of it so much more clear in my head and everything. So I'm super for it. I have so many friends who have had therapy and it's like changed their life. And I think, from my experience of it and the experiences of my friend, what's really important about it is, I think often when we are going through a tough time, we know that the people who love us worry about us. So we want somebody to talk to, but then we're scared to talk to a friend or a family member because we know by doing that, they'll also worry about you too, and you don't want to burden them. And I think, of course you're not a burden, but it's easy to sometimes worry about that. And I think therapy, just having somebody there who's completely impartial and it's a judgment-free zone, just gives you that safe space to just talk about things that you really need to talk about. And I think that's important.
And do you think the culture about therapy is shifting somewhat? It sounds as if your friends are very open and amenable to it.
I think it's completely changing. I think as much as social media is flawed and can cause a lot of issues, it's also opened the door for people to really publicly normalize their kind of mental health issues and the ways of dealing with it. Like I said, when one of, following those women online was actually a real help for me, because they do normalize these feelings and these thoughts that you have. And a lot of these women that I follow too do openly say therapy is amazing because of X, Y, and Z. And so I think that being such a, I don't know, it's just a lot more accessible in thought, to see online now, that I think the general opinion of it is definitely shifting. So yeah, and less stigmatized. Yeah.
It's great to hear, and thanks for doing this, because it all helps, speaking so openly about the challenges that we go through. I think hopefully makes it more relatable, and it strikes us all, and we also can build our own resources to be able to deal with it. And I'm interested in finding out a little bit more about digging deeper into your well-being habits on a day-to-day basis, physical and mental health. What would you say that you do on a regular basis to keep you well?
I think I can be very hard on myself, and I think I can, especially, I guess because music, it is such a self-motivating thing that you have to do. So I can be like, why can't you get out of bed? Or like, why can't you find the motivation to send that email? So I can be really hard on myself. And I think when I had that shift as well, I was just sort of like, you need to just, your body and your mind is telling you where you are in that moment. And small achievements that you do that day are really important, just as important as the big ones. So if today you can't send all those emails, what have you done? You've got all your washing done. Do you know what I mean? You've like tidied up that shelf you were looking to tidy up for ages and couldn't find the energy to do yesterday, and you've done it today. So I think for me, I know personally I have to do something to not feel guilty, because I am quite strict with myself. But I've learnt to see the small things as just as important as the big things, and there's a lot, and just kind of congratulating myself on doing things that some people may even see tedious, because sometimes you don't have the energy to do them at all. So I think it's important to, yeah.
And diet and exercise, we were chatting earlier about things to do to try and boost your immunity.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been massively sporty, but I've always been massively energetic. Like I have I'm like got a crazy amount of pent up energy all the time. So I actually now am a really big fan of like I got into this habit in the middle of like last year, whenever I was feeling sad, I would just put on my favorite song and literally dance for like 1 hour. And I'd come out of it so exhausted, but just so euphoric. And I didn't pick up on what I was doing until later on this year. I was like, oh, you're getting all that energy out, and you're kind of exercising. And then at the end of it, you're having that like rush of adrenaline. And so now that's just what I do. I actively do that now.
Okay, so times when you're sad and to actively pick up your mood,
Yeah,
you would do something energized and related to music.
yeah. And I think I always felt bad because my friends are really sporty and they're always at the gym, and they're like, oh, whenever I feel down, I just go to the gym and I get it all out. And I used to feel like, oh, I'm never going to feel amazing because I'm just not a sporty person. And all these people were telling me that exercise and sport is the way to being mentally well, but it's just not me. So and what is me is being wacky and dancing on tables and like listening to music. So I found my way of doing that's actually suited me. And it sounds crazy, I think, when I tell people, but I'm like, trust me, it's so fun and so nice and good. So yeah.
And the key being you found something that works for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And something, I think there's so many tips, and people can give you so much advice, and it's very easy to feel jaded by it, or like you don't fit into the more popular ideas of what works. And so I think, yeah, I was just like, right, this is the way that I can do that, but with my spin on it. And then you don't feel guilty for not being able to fit into the normal way of doing things, kind of thing. Yeah.
Any other well-being habits that you can think of?
I think just kind of, I mean, I said this before, just kind of listening to my body is my key.
Tell us a little bit about that. How does that work for you?
It is just kind of when I think, yeah, forcing myself to do stuff has never really worked for me. I'm stubborn in my life, and I'm stubborn with myself. So if I don't want to do something, it's really hard to make myself do it. And if I'm feeling, and I am actually, I am quite quick to feel quite physically drained. I can lose a lot of energy. I've always been like that since I was a kid. And so, yeah, I can quite often force myself to push through it, and because I want to achieve loads in that day, or I want to make sure I've left the house, and I would feel a lot of shame if I didn't do that. And now I'm like, no, because if you force yourself to do something when you're not emotionally well or you're not physically well, you'll just have a longer time of not being well. And so now I have to say to myself, give yourself this lie-in, have that bubble bath instead of doing your like groceries, and that is my way of just kind of making sure I give myself the space to get over whatever it is that's making me feel run down, basically.
I love that tip, listening to your body.
Yeah.
I think that's really a great one. And then what about social support for you, or social, professional support? Who looks after you in your circles, would you say, and who can you turn to? And
Yeah, well, I mean, before I didn't really have anyone, and that's why, because I was signed and I did have a manager, and then that all kind of fell apart, and so I was doing everything very much on my own. And now I've just started working with a manager in October, and so that takes a lot of pressure off, and it's kind of like, again, like a problem halved kind of thing. So that's definitely having that person there who can just help you rationalize things is obviously a great help. Yeah.
Mm. And in terms of the music industry in specific, I'm sure it comes with very individual challenges. What would your advice be to anyone who's looking to go into it, knowing what the experience that you've had of moving from
Yeah.
manager to independent?
I would say 100% don't think that it is as glamorous as the way it's presented. You know, every artist that you see is presenting essentially a fantasy. We all do it. It's what being a pop star is. It's kind of a character, and it's an image, and it's a brand. And don't don't go into it thinking that your life behind closed doors will be completely glam. And if it isn't, don't feel shame for that, and don't feel like you don't fit in, because everyone in music is dealing with the same pressure and situation. So I think that's a big one. Is I think it's very easy to think that once you get into it, it's just going to be like all the movies and everything. And when it isn't, you can feel like, I used to struggle with kind of feeling like, why I've got this amazing thing and I'm doing all this amazing stuff. Why aren't I happy? What have I've I've got this amazing platform and all these amazing experiences. What have I done to deserve being here if I'm not going to be completely grateful for it? And actually, the truth is, especially if you start young, and I got signed at 16, the truth is, it's such insane pressure and such an insane industry. There's so much money on floating about, and so much pressure on you to be a product and to be the face of a campaign, pretty much, that most people don't have to deal with in their whole lifetime, let alone at age 16. Do you know what I mean? So I hadn't had the life experience to be equipped for those situations. So it just felt like a very intense amount of pressure. So I think knowing yourself is a big thing. Believing in your own abilities and creativity, because I think a lot of people will make you feel that maybe you are inexperienced and therefore don't have the authority to make decisions. But I think sticking to your guns is really, really important. I think just kind of allowing yourself to grow. I think that you feel like you have to accelerate your growth because you need to be funny in interviews, and you need to know what your fashion sense is so that you can wear it at all the events and everything. But nobody knows that when you're young. You don't figure that out for years, sometimes ever. It changes all the time. So even though you will feel an intense pull to have all the answers right now, you don't have to. Just keep growing as you would if you weren't in music, and just give yourself that space. We all deserve that space to find out who we are. So yeah, just allow yourself to have it, I think.
That's beautifully expressed. Growth. And speaking of growth, what lies ahead for you in the future? What are you looking forward to working on, and what well-being tools will you need on the journey?
Yeah, I think, so I've got some more music that I've written, and I'm going to release this year. And luckily now I've got a bigger team around me. I think for me now, my well-being kind of needs to center around, I think, just being a little bit more confident. I've learned how to handle the situations. I've learned how to be kind to myself when it goes one way or the other. I think now I'm going to challenge myself to be more bold and be more, you've proven that you can do it. So now go for it. And I think challenging myself is my tip for myself this year.
Very good. I like that one. And tell us a little bit about the album, 23.
Oh, yeah, so 23 was on my EP, and that is a song that I wrote at the I wrote it at the start of 2018, because I spent New Year's Eve with my best friend who I've known since I was 11. And we had this really weird New Year's Eve where we just sat up all night talking about how being an adult isn't what we thought it was going to be, kind of thing. You know, she'd just finished uni, and she was trying to figure out, she'd got a new job, but she kind of didn't know how to go from being a uni student to being this professional up in the big city kind of thing. And I was trying to figure out music. This was after I'd released that song that was really difficult, and I was like, maybe music is too hard, maybe it's not my path. Do I need to listen to the universe, which is clearly telling me that this is going to be tricky for me? And we just had this whole conversation about, I guess just how tough it is out there. And then I just went away and I wrote this song about how, we had all these experiences together of being a kid, where we grew up, being at school, having that sort of childish confidence and freedom, and a lot less responsibilities, and then being thrust into having all these responsibilities, and how it wasn't just quite how we'd played the movie out in our head, kind of thing. But then eventually being like, one thing is for sure, and it's kept you by my side, so it's all good. And that was what 23 was about. So yeah.
Well, it seems challenging enough to be in the music industry at a young age, let alone just to be young. What do you think are some of the challenges that youth face, in particular social media and the sort of the increasing digital world?
Yeah, I think I've got 3 younger sisters, so I get to watch it in real time. I've obviously got a big social media following, and a lot of my friends do. And I think that intense need to put out the best version of yourself and have like an aesthetic, you not only need to look like you're having fun all the time, but it also needs to be very aesthetically pleasing. So it's almost like we can detach from real moments because we're looking at it as photo opportunities. And while I do think sometimes that's super fun, and me and my friends sometimes have amazing photo shoots, I think I definitely try and make myself be present in the moment as much as I can in between those little photo shoots. But I definitely think for kids these days, it must be so bizarre. I mean, I grew up before Instagram and kind of Snapchat, and that was so big and such a big part of their life. They've come into age when that is just a staple, and I feel like I can't even imagine how different it must be for them, to be honest.
And any suggestions as to how to how to navigate it in a healthy way?
I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for those younger than me because I can't quite fathom how it must be for them. But what I tend to do is just remind myself that nothing is what it seems online. And if I'm posting this whole beautiful montage of myself and then secretly, crying because I've lost my keys one day or something, something, and I'm, actually sat here looking at my Instagram with no makeup on, in my sweatpants, eating like food in bed. You know what I mean? If I'm doing that, then everybody else is too. And I think just reminding yourself of that is really, really important. And, we're all allowed to be this less glam version of ourselves. It's kind of sometimes the most fun you ever have, And I think just remembering that, and I guess thinking of that as like this private side that no one else gets to see. Like, again, going back to writing the songs and being on stage, it's kind of like social media is that you have all this experience that you do in your private time, and then you pick the best parts and you put it online, the same as I do when I'm writing a song. I have all this really vulnerable, closed off, emotional time in the studio, and then I just put out the super glam, makeup done, best outfit on performance. And I think, but they're equally as important and special and beautiful as the other. And I think that's a good way of thinking about social media.
Yeah. We have such a wonderfully mature approach to it, and you seem to have transitioned so well from a great number of challenges in the industry that you're in to a change of mindset and a set of healthy behaviors to match. But we do know that a lot of youth have a lot of increasing mental health issues. It's well documented. And I wonder what advice you might have in general to people growing up as to how to stay mentally well.
I think it's the one that everyone says, but it is the truth, is talking about it, reaching out. I think it's pretty clear that I'm such a big advocate for being kind to yourself and just give it and just being patient with yourself the same way you would a friend, the same way you would a family member. But I think it's definitely important to reach out. And if you don't have a support network around you that you feel comfortable doing that with, which happens, I'm very blessed to be from a really big family who's all very close, but that isn't always the case. One thing that the internet has made more available is there are forums, there are places you can go online. When I was feeling confused, I found those kindred spirits, and they helped me articulate how I felt. And that everything's a lot more connected these days, and you can just seek information and seek solidarity, and just try and have as many conversations about it as you can, I think.
Yeah. Brilliant message to people. And if someone's watching right now and they're in a really difficult place and they may not have the energy to even actively look for a forum or social support, do you have any words of encouragement?
I would just say that's okay. That's okay. Just lie in bed. Just do it. Just, like I said, whatever your body needs in that moment, it is the vessel that we are all in is a miracle in itself, and it knows what it needs. And if you need to not do anything today, then don't do anything today. Don't feel any shame. You will eventually, and it will come, but don't force yourself or put any pressure or guilt on yourself to exert more energy than you're capable of right now, because that will do more damage in the long run. So that's okay. Just do it. Just do you.
Beautiful summary of self-kindness as well. Thank you so much, Chloe, for sharing all of your experiences, and in particular how you navigate this challenging world that you're in, and all the best for your future. I love your work. We were listening to work and bopping along. Fantastic voice, and you do pull off the image, because it looks like you're having a great fun and fashion, and everything is to perfection. But we really value and appreciate you uncovering the other side of you, or an alternative and very authentic side. So we're very grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. HarleyTherapy.com is here to help you book counseling with therapists online or in person at times and prices that suit you wherever you are worldwide. If this is your first listen to Therapy Lab, do hit subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. If you feel you'd benefit from therapy and want to transform your life, visit HarleyTherapy.com to find a therapist anywhere in the UK and worldwide via Skype. We'll see you next time.